Time. We are a progressive revolutionary church that believes that love wins, period. We're based over in Fort Lauderdale. We've got a live service and we also have an online service. So today we're talking about an eye for an eye, and we're also talking about revenge. I think it's going to be a really neat kind of dive into what does that mean? What does it mean to poke another person out? You know, not like eye for eye, but like, what does that mean? When you dive in there, what does that actually mean? I look forward to exploring this with you guys too. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. Nice to be here with you. Let's start off the morning with a prayer. Will you pray with me, please? When we look over our shoulder at fear shadowing us today, you go before us into tomorrow, making a path through the sea of yesterday's doubts. When our legs tremble from the effort of trying to stand up for what you hope us to be and all creation to be, you stand at our side. You offer hope and strength, clouds of grace, and we offer our love to you. And when we turn our hearts into deserts of stone and bitterness, you transform them into oases of joy. And when we come up with all sorts of rules for those who come seeking you, you tear up the list and stretch your arms out wide in a welcoming grace. Servants of all, we offer our life to you. Amen. So this morning we start off offering the first verse that is in Judges. And we're going to talk a little bit about Samson, who is probably a guy who's really developed an incredible testosterone level. Okay, he's like that type of guy. He is one that you probably, if you saw him today, he would be the one with a mullet, you know, in the back. And so it is a bit like a Jerry Springer show, the whole part of Samson. So I'd like to kind of just go into it and talk a little bit about what's going on in his life as we start to understand that God is trying to move humanity. God is trying to move humanity to a new level from this level right here. And so we'll talk about this idea of violence. So Samson, he goes down and he sees that there is a woman who is a Philistine, which would be opposite of his Jewish belief and faith. And he falls in love with her, and he goes back and he tells his mom and dad, you have to go down and get her so that she can be my wife. And so they do. They go down and arrange the marriage, because that's how they did. They arranged marriages. And so they arranged the marriage, which is going to be a 7-day affair. So those of you who have done like a marriage and it's like one day, imagine 7 days of this. And so he is excited about it, and he's gone down and he's talking to her brothers. And he tells them this story that they're going to have to solve. And he guarantees that if they can solve this riddle, if they can solve the riddle, he will buy them all linen clothes. 3 pairs, 3 sets. And so, in the midst of him doing this, his bride wants to know, well, what is the answer to this riddle? And so he finally, on the 7th day, tells her, and she tells her brothers. And so, at the wedding feast, they say, we know the solution to your riddle, and they tell it to him. And what happens? He gets so furious, he leaves the wedding feast right then and there. And he goes down to an area, and he kills 30 men and takes their clothes from them. And then a few days later, he brings them back. And by that time, the woman he was going to marry was given to another man. And so now she is married to somebody else. So Samson decides that he's going to take a goat and bring it to her house to see her, which is, of course, what you do when you are going to visit your ex-going-to-be wife, is you grab a goat and bring it to them. And so he grabs this goat and he drags it there and the father will not let him see. He said, I let her marry somebody else because I thought you weren't interested. But here's my younger daughter. Isn't she sweet? And Samson gets so ticked off, so upset, that he goes and he kills. And the people get so upset on him that they say, let's go kill the woman he was going to marry and her father. This will teach him. And then Samson gets so upset. What does he do? He takes foxes and he ties their tails to things that are on fire, and they race through the fields and they catch everything on fire. See, there's this escalation of violence. That if you do this to me, well, I'm going to do this to you. And if you do this to me, I'm going to do this to you. And some idea is that this is a redemptive violence, that somewhere along the line we'll hit a point where you just go, fine, now we're all even. But it doesn't work that way. It just gets more and more and more. This idea of redemptive violence is a myth. And this is where we start with the idea of revenge. So the idea of redemptive violence, that we'll just keep escalating it until we finally give in. And see, the Bible realized that this was not a good thing to do. So it starts in Exodus, this idea that if we have redemptive violence, what about just an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? It was a better way of controlling the violence. Because what would happen before this is that if your tribe did something to my tribe, then we would kill all of your tribe. Or if my tribe did something out there, they would kill all of my tribe. It was this idea of, well, can we do vengeance a little bit more controlled, like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. So in Exodus 21, he talks about, suppose two men were fighting, and they hit a pregnant woman, causing the baby to come out. If there was no further injury, the man who caused this accident must pay money, whatever amount the woman's husband says, and that the courts allow. But if there is further injury, the punishment must be paid, a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. So this was actually trying to control the idea of revenge. But can we do revenge just on what you lost is what they will lose? In Leviticus, they say the same thing, that whoever causes injury for a neighbor must receive the same kind of injury in return. A broken bone for a broken bone, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Anyone who has injured a person must be injured in the same way. Whoever kills another person's animal must have their animal killed. The law says this. And Leviticus talks about anyone who takes a life, a human being, must be put to death too. Deuteronomy talks about the idea, whoever gives false witness and intends to have the other party lie must be purged from evil. No pity shown on them, a life for a life, and an eye for an eye, and a hand for a hand, and a foot for a foot. And see, these were passages in the Old Testament trying to make it better, trying to make it so that it wasn't so absolutely horrible. A kind of a tit for tat, a tooth for a tooth. And you have to realize that this was actually bringing mercy. It was the beginning of bringing mercy and limiting vengeance. The idea that a man who was injured by one tribe would actually kill the other tribe. This was trying to limit that idea of vengeance. So when Jesus comes along and Jesus says in Matthew, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. As anyone who slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other. And if anyone wants to sue you, to take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone wants to force you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who is asking you, and do not turn away from the ones who want to borrow from you. And he goes on to say the idea of, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to shine and rise on evil and good. He sends rain to the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward do you get? Even the tax collectors do that. And if you greet only those people who are yours, what reward do you get? Don't even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So there was this real understanding that Jesus is kind of raising the rate, raising the level of understanding of what we're supposed to do to people who persecute you, people who injure you, people who cause you pain. And then throughout the scriptures, we go on and on with this idea that in Romans they say, don't repay evil with evil. They're taking off from what Jesus has taught them, and they're starting to understand what Jesus is saying in a deeper level. That as a Christian and as these people that are following Jesus, that you start to understand that repaying one for evil, don't do that. Beloved, never avenge yourself. Leave the wrath of God to be the wrath of God. In Thessalonians, it talks about make sure no one pays back wrong for wrong. The idea of paying back wrong for wrong. But always strive to do good to each other and to everyone else. And finally, Peter says it. He says, finally, all of you, be like-minded and sympathetic. Love one another. Be compassionate, humble. Do not repay evil for evil. Do not repay insult for insult. So Jesus is asking us to live in a different way. And I mean, some people read these passages and they say, this is really okay, that's nice, Jesus is that guy, and that's good for Jesus, but I don't think I can do that. See, Jesus is trying to change humanity into something that forgives deeply and that has patience and understanding. And let me be clear that Jesus is not laying down some kind of like Hallmark, card type of thing. He's laying down stuff that's really hard for us to do. That we are called to love like God loves. And that we start to understand that God has planted this deep within the roots of humanity, that this is what God wants us to be like. To follow the teachings of Jesus. And I know that a lot of times what we get is we get a thing like, well, Pastor, I know, I can put on the teachings of Jesus here in the church, it's okay, but when I walk out that door, I take those things up because they don't work out there. And you say, no, that's where they're supposed to really, really work. To live into this realm that God is calling us to live into. To develop a true servant's heart. Because I think you're right. I think we do have this tendency to put these trappings on, kind of like we put a coat on, and inside here, we're all good Christians, and we all talk about Christ, and we all talk about the idea of loving your neighbor, and And then when we walk out the door, we take that thing off, and we're going, okay, now we live in the real world. But we still call ourselves Christians, but we just don't do what Jesus teaches, you know? I mean, we wear t-shirts around here every once in a while that says, you know, what if Jesus really meant the things he said? You know, what if Jesus really meant these things, that this is what we're called to do? These are the people that we're called to be. This idea that Jesus wants us to be people that really care for each other. I mean, what would that look like if you lived that out? You know, people that have been really overwhelmed by this verse are people like Gandhi, you know, like Martin Luther King. You know, the idea that evil cannot push evil out. You know, that nonviolence is something that we must address. And nonviolence protesting is something that is deeply built within the Christian faith. That we can actually protest and do it nonviolently. We can walk the walk, so to speak. So the question is, like, when we look out and we see these things, do we actually start to understand that this subversive teaching that Jesus gives is a call for us to stand up? You know, that we can't fight fire with fire. We don't spew back evil, but we spew back truth. You know, you look at some of the things that have happened over the years, and you see people that were survivors of the crimes in South Africa. And they actually become people who now dictate and help rebuild their country. Nelson Mandela invited his prisoners, the prison guards that were there for him, to the front to see his inauguration. I mean, Mother Teresa ministers to those people who are, and unselfishly she ministers to the lowest of the lows, the outcast of the outcast. You know, I run into people all the time that they have had something horrible happen in their life, but they still have this ability to forgive. I ran into a woman whose son was killed at Sandy Hook, and she had the ability to actually forgive the person. And I think that sometimes we have to ask ourselves that forgiving somebody is exactly what we're asked to do, but are we ever asked to proactively step forward and say, you know what? All these killings that we see at the schools, all the red alerts that we have, all this gun violence that we're involved in, here in this country is unacceptable. And we have to answer that these things we are not alone in. You know, Australia, when they had the largest shooting, the worst shooting they had, within 2 weeks, the federal government had implemented a new program that banned rapid-fire machine guns, banned shotguns, and unified owners to the idea that everything had to be registered and licensed. And within 10 years of that time, gun deaths in Australia had fallen by 50%. I mean, we're not alone in this stuff. And we have to forgive the people that are involved in this. But can we be proactive? South Africa, gun-related deaths were almost cut in half in a 10-year period with new gun legislation. New Zealand, as soon as their massive shooting happened there, it took a matter of 24 hours before they had put into effect, at this point, a law that would be changed that they voted almost unanimously to change the country's gun laws. And within a month later, they had banned all semi-automatic weapons. You know, we know some of the things that we can do proactively. How many texts do I have to get from people saying, Pastor, I just heard about another shooting. Pastor, I just heard about another group of people killed. And we say to them, yes, we need to forgive them. That's right, we do. But we need to ask ourselves, do we and can we proactively change things? Amen? Amen.
Wow. Okay. So there was a lot to unpack in that process, that sermon, that message. So redemptive violence. Unpack that for me.
Yeah. So the idea again, it was this idea that redemptive violence was that if you do something to me, then I could do something to you, and I would up it just a little bit. So if you hurt me, then I would set you on fire, or
Okay.
and somewhere it would get to a point where it was like, okay, that's it, we're finally done. And the problem is it doesn't. It just
Okay.
keeps going up and up and up. And
You punch me, I punch you and kick you.
right, exactly, and
yeah.
it just keeps going up and up and up. And so
Okay.
the idea that it somehow redeemed everything, the redemption of it, and it doesn't work. It's a myth. It's a myth that will solve anything.
Yeah.
And so Jesus
Or at
was,
least that's what the concept was. Is okay. So you stole something with that hand, you lose that hand.
well, no, it was more a person-to-person thing, and it was
Okay.
It was like if you injured me, my hand, then I would take you to court, and they would injure your hand to the same level. And so that was. I mean, it sounds horrible now. It sounds just the idea.
There's like a bad side, but there's also like kind of a weird like. It prevents them from going further. It's
yeah.
strange. It's like.
Well, it's again
like smiling and frowning at the same time.
Humanity is slowly, moving up to treating people with more respect and concern. And so God seems to be kind of like moving up, saying like, okay, you haven't been able to understand that, you kill, this guy's brother, then they kill, your family, and then, so I'm going to try to give you an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which is not where we're going to end. We're going to get even deeper than that, because Jesus is going to come along and say, listen, I'm not just saying an eye for an eye,
Yeah.
I'm saying that you need to care for the other person, you need to forgive the other person, you need to, and that changes everything. I mean, but I didn't say it, so let me tell you, okay?
Okay.
So
Behind the scenes.
it was, okay, so Jesus is doing something really pretty brilliant, okay?
Okay.
And that is that there's an understanding that when you say, if somebody slaps you on the cheek, okay? Now,
I know where you're going.
Okay,
Okay. Unpack this. Okay. So.
so which is your right cheek?
This is my right.
Right cheek. So if I'm going to slap you on your right cheek, okay,
Okay.
I'm going to have to slap you this way, right?
Oh, for the back of the hand. Okay.
Right,
Okay.
okay. Now, another thing is that people weren't left-handed.
Wait, why backhand?
Okay, because that's the only way I can slap you. I can't
Okay.
do it.
Oh yeah. What if you use that hand?
You don't use your left hand in that culture because your left hand was used for wiping, and so you was considered a two-way. So if I slapped you like this, that would be one thing. Now, if you turn your cheek to me now, turn the other cheek the other way. That's
This
it.
way?
Okay.
So you have to slap
now
the
the
other.
only way I would be able to slap you is and not do a backhand,
Yeah.
which would be like some kind of.
So
I would
it'd
have
be
to
for
use
the front of
same-
the
which would be in that culture, it would have been considered like a disrespect of me that I slapped you this way. And so Jesus was basically saying, if you turn the other cheek, the person really can't slap you without disrespecting themselves. And the other cool thing was
So no open hand slap.
right.
Okay.
So
okay,
now
okay.
so if you in the Roman times you were allowed to take one of the people and say you're going to carry this bag with me for 1 mile.
Okay.
Okay. But after 1 mile, if he made him carry it any farther, it was considered against the law, breaking the law to have him carry. So if you're carrying the guy's thing and you're going like, okay, here's 1 mile, and you go, yeah, I'm going to carry it another mile, they'd be going like, stop, no, don't. Okay,
and then it was against the law for them to go further.
Right, and then the last thing is that there were really only two pieces of clothes.
Okay.
There was like a tunic that kind of fit over, and then like a robe that went over that.
Okay.
And so if somebody was suing you for your tunic, if somebody was suing you for that, then what they say is go ahead and give him everything, because it was considered disrespectful for you to see somebody naked. The disrespect was on you now.
That's awesome.
And so in all three ways, Jesus is like it's
fine.
even
You want
deeper.
this?
Yeah.
You're gonna see the
got
family
this, and you
jewels
got
right
this
here.
too. And it was considered like that was like really disrespectful. And so the person would be disrespectful. Yeah, so like Jesus is wise. That's some good stuff.
It's always fun to unpack these and kind of more than just the biblical side, but the historical side of the whole journey and the process and the teachings, which is kind of neat.
I mean, right now, I don't know when you're actually seeing this, but we are at the 5th anniversary of the shooting, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Yeah.
It's been 5 years since a young boy walked in, who was disturbed and mentally ill on Valentine's Day, a day that you express with love, and so to actually kill people, because because we know this kid, we knew that he was so injured, so damaged, in such pain. This was his redemptive violence. It was.
Things like that don't happen for
No.
That we're winding back. We ran a youth group a long time ago, and we saw a lot of injured kids come in, and without that kind of support system, created not just by us, but by the other kids that are in there. It's a big youth group, and they supported each other. There were a lot of possible disastrous kind of circumstances that were diverted because of support systems that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah, actually, Nicholas Cruz told me, he said, if I was able to have gone to one of the youth groups, I don't think I would have done what I did.
Yeah.
That he didn't have that support, he didn't have that concern.
Now there's a lot of hurt.
So again, we're in a world that seems to be, we are in Florida, which they just made it legal to carry a gun without a permit or without any type of certificate or anything like that. So again, things are going to get crazy. So whatever you can do, however you can do, it would be really good to be against that and help be against that.
It's a scary situation. So.
Okay, well, good Sunday.
As that, guys, if this meant something to you, if this message meant something to you, if it dug deep into your heart and it meant something, probably it would mean something to somebody else. In this time of uncertainty, scare, kind of just weirdness going on. People need to hear this kind of message, that you need to turn the other cheek. You don't need to freak out when somebody pulls in front of you. It's okay to let it go. It's not going to be that heaviness on your heart. So share it with somebody. And also like and subscribe if you want to hear some more messages about this.
Be good.
Yeah. You guys have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week.
Ciao.